All right, this week we will be talking about life after kids, okay? I have a beautiful guest by the name of Syreeta. She will be joining me as we talk about how women transition into motherhood. What does that look like? How we may get lost, and then how do we come back out of that funk and get ourselves back together again? Let's get into it. I am Dr. Zen Johnson. Welcome to Unlearning Life as We Know It. I believe that we all deserve to be happy and that we have the ability to unlearn the old ways, learn new ways, and grow to become the greatest version of ourselves. Start your journey to a happier life right now.
Hi, I am so excited. Thank you all for joining me one more time and hopefully for many more. I'm so excited today because I am talking about life after kids, and I have invited an amazing friend, a mother, an entrepreneur. So we have so much in common by the name of Syreeta. And we are going to just dig in with after you have kids, what is your life? How do you lose yourself? How do you come back? And finding comfort in the fact that, yeah, you may have lost yourself, but you will come back. There's ways for us to come back. And yes, you may have changed, but it's okay to change. We're supposed to change. So it's just finding comfort in that. And then the bounce back, the glow up, as they say. So yeah, Syreeta, you want to just introduce yourself and,
My name is Syreeta Locket. I am an entrepreneur, a friend, and a mom to Zen, of course. And I'm just excited to be here and to talk about motherhood.
Awesome. So as you all know, I have now at this point, I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old and 2 little boys. And that's actually how Syreeta and I met, was through our kids. It was when my 4-year-old was a little bitty boy. We were meeting at the library doing crazy stuff like baby yoga. And whenever we're the ones that really needed the yoga,
Yes.
we were there stretching them out like they had a stressful day. But that's how we met. Yeah, doing baby yoga and some other classes at libraries and things like that. But it's how we connected. And Syreeta, how old is your daughter now?
My daughter is 3. She'll be 4 in a few months.
Awesome.
So, girl, super cute. And when I saw Zen's son, I just fell in love instantly. I knew they had to be friends, and I had to be friends with her.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that first year. How did you feel your first year?
My first year was tough. I felt very exhausted, drained. I felt like I was going through a huge adjustment to support my daughter and put her first. I no longer was working. I moved from full-time to part-time. So that was a big adjustment. And I had to change in terms of who I put first. It was no longer me. I had to put her first. So I was going through a big change and just a big shift in my life.
Yeah. For me, I was I think I was 33 when I had my first son. And so for me, it was kind of wait a minute, what just happened? I've been by myself this entire time. And here I am now with this person that is dependent on me for everything. And so I think it's great to have a child older, but in a lot of ways, I think it's also kind of a little bit more difficult because you're set in your ways at this point. You've had all these years of freedom and you're traveling and you're moving, and then boom, it's a baby. And you're wait a minute, I had all this freedom and now I'm just you feel I felt stuck, and I was breastfeeding too. So it took me 3 months to really say okay, I like motherhood. But for the first 3 months, I really, really struggled. And I think also for me, I didn't drop anything. I didn't stop working full time and went and go to part time or stop working at all. I continued to do it all. And then I just added a baby in the mix, and then that really my world was crazy for the first year. And kept him at home, right? It was like I was trying to be the stay-at-home mom and this whole like, but I work and I do this and I have a business and and I did not stop. So it was that first year was really, really, really tough for me, for sure. And then like as you're kind of getting back to yourself, I feel like the first year I totally lost myself. It was just like I was so drawn in on like, okay, I'm a mother. I got to do this. What am I doing? And then both of us had something in common. We didn't have family around.
And for me, that was
right?
the part. Like, I feel like the lack of family, which I know a lot of women experience, just like a lot of women, you know, continue working and just have to drop the baby off and keep it moving. Like, without family, that made it so tough for me. So I fell right into motherhood, maybe 1,000%. But the rest of my life wasn't where I wanted it to be. And that for me was what became challenging. So when I laid her down for rest, I didn't have anything else that I picked up that made me super happy.
Dad, so that's like my next question to you was actually going to be, you know, what were the signs that you were losing yourself in the process? So that was one of the signs, right? So what were some of the other signs where you were like, wait a minute, or whenever you look at it now, you probably didn't notice it then, but whenever you look at it now, what were some of those signs that you were losing yourself?
I noticed it pretty quickly. I noticed it probably in the first few months that I didn't have anything other than just like my extreme love, but also my extreme anxiety as it related to being a mom and a new mom and not having a support system. So I felt not at peace and not at rest with who I was just within my skin. Like it was like when I held on to her, I was good. I was a mom. It was great. But like I said, when it came time to then cook a meal or do this or do that, I then felt like, oh my gosh, am I doing this right? I wish I had, some support. Like it just so many other things flooded in. So I noticed it pretty early on that I didn't feel myself. And then my solution to that, not feeling 100% me, was to then just be even more of a mom. So it's like, because there was nothing else for me to turn my attention to, I was just like, I'm just going to pour all that I do have into her. So it's like library, playground, baby yoga, music class. I overexerted myself in motherhood just because nothing else was kind of there for me at that moment.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting because I think we have like two different views or perspectives or experiences, I will say. Like for me, I don't think I was so consumed with not losing myself. And I think that was because of the marriage that I had before, where I did lose myself. And I did all this work where I was just like, I'm not going to lose myself. So I have still today, I kind of have like these little bells that go off. That's like, hold on, wait a minute. Have you had time for yourself? Wait. We're not going to go down that road again. So I'm very sensitive to it because I made it so far. And so when I had a baby and a new husband, and I was just very much so like, wait a minute now, you all are not going to make me lose myself. So I would have my days of like exhaustion and way too much. But then what I did, which I'm not saying it was healthy, but I did these things to like prove to myself that I still had it. Like I remember he was then 6 months old, because I love to travel. I was like, oh, we're all going to Japan. Yeah, we're all going to get on a 24-hour flight with a with a 6-month-old baby. And we're going to fly to Japan and we're going to stay for, 7-10 days, whatever it was. And we're going to explore. And we did it. But I look back at it now and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? There's no way now I would be telling my 1-year-old or my 4-year-old, let's get on the 24-hour flight, because it just sounds crazy to me, just because, they're moving around, they're walking, they're talking, all this stuff is going on. And I'm like, there's no way. They have to get older for me to do that. Like, we'll get to that point. But when I think about it now, the reason that I did that was I was trying to prove to myself that I still got it. And I'm not going to lose myself in the mix of all of this. So I kind of like added more to it just to prove points so that I didn't lose myself completely, you know? And then I had babies kind of back to back. I think my son was like 1.5 years old, maybe a little bit over. And then I got pregnant again. So it was like baby and then newborn. And then as soon as he got into a good kind of almost, you know, like nice age there, then I got pregnant again. And then I started all over again. Right. But I was very sensitive to not losing myself. But whenever I look back at it now, like today, I look at the past 4 years and it's like, I mentioned this to you before, it's like my head has been underwater and I like just came back up for air and I'm like, wait, what's been going on in the world? There's music artists out now that I didn't know of before. There's, you know, different shows out now that I didn't know before. And I talk to people and they're like, yeah, they're hot now. And I'm like, I didn't know. Where have I been? And I'm like, oh, I've been in the trenches of motherhood and like trying to keep myself together and also like bring up these little boys that there is an entire world out right now. And I mean, thank God for TikTok. TikTok's the only thing keeping me a little bit, keeping me alert and aware, you know, and some things I don't care about either. Like there's a lot that I'm just like, I don't have time for that. I don't really care about that. Like, so I don't pay attention to it, right? That's probably why, you know, some music artists, you know, I'm just not into at all, but they're out there. But a lot of these names, I'm like, I don't know who the hell these people are. Like I've just been underwater, you know, but then also there's a lot of things that I look even at my personal life and I'm like, whoa, this has been going on for 4 years or 5 years or 6 years. Like what's happening? And I'm like, I just wasn't paying attention. So now I'm in that mode of like changing some things, right? So after you realize that you kind of lost yourself in your process, like how did you get to like know yourself again? Like what was it that was like the final straw or the final alert? And then how did you kind of bring yourself back up?
Well, one thing I want to note just from what we've been saying is everyone's process is going to be different. Like we both kind of had the same event happen to us. It shifted us, but we definitely went through the process different. We looked at ourselves different. What should we do? You know, so that's important for all women to know, because I was like, oh my gosh, Zen's going to Japan and I can't even do X, Y, and Z, you know? And so you also have to look inward into yourself and like, what can I do today? What is my goal? What's my path? And it's like, so for you, it was to prove yourself. For me, it was just like, I'm just going to pour into where I can pour for now. And so it's important for your listeners to know, like everyone just has to go step by step, day by day as a new mom through this process, because it is a process.
Yeah, it is.
And, for me, when I actually like realized that, okay, she's in a good place, she's happy, my life has become more enriched, I moved closer to family, I found that missing piece and I went back to where I was missing and I helped replenish myself. And once I felt good, I'm like, okay, so who am I now? And what do I want? Like, I know that I'm more than her mother, and being her mother is what inspired me to go back to myself. Like, okay, this little person has these eyes and they're watching me. So what will be the story she tells of her mom as she gets older? What do I want her to know about me? And I started thinking like, oh, she won't know this. And I haven't even gotten dressed and she doesn't even know my love of fashion yet. And, you know, and then I started putting those items back on me, whether it's clothes or whether it's music or whatever you're into. It's like, I want her to share the love that I have for something. She doesn't have to like it herself, but just like that I like it, you know, appreciate who I am and see me. And so I just started showing up little by little for her, put on makeup, you know, so she could see like what my face looks like with makeup. Oh, mom looks different, you know, like just little things that kind of put the pieces back together. And then once I actually like sat down and really thought about like, who am I again, it just started to click. And I finally it's like, oh, I'm kind of like my old self before I had her, but then my new self, like with all the values that I learned since having her. So it's like, I'm kind of like better than before.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, which you just brought up, is the fact that like you have your old self and there's parts of that old self that you do bring into the current, but then you are new, like you're a mother, and the power that you have gained, like as a mother, the confidence, the like strength that you realize that you are as a woman, that comes into play big time in like every aspect of your life. Like I tap into that strength now, you know? But then you have the old parts. It's like, I feel like you don't exactly lose yourself. It's just like, well, what? Because all those parts you may not even want to bring with you. You know what I mean? It's like, so what parts of the old self did I like that I want to bring along? And what parts do I just need to leave in the background? Yes. You know? And then that creates like this new molding of who you are today, you know? And that's wonderful. So it's just like, it's being creative on both sides and not just like, oh my goodness, I lost myself. It's like, no, you're not the same person. And I think that's something, especially like in relationships, I think that's something that women hear a lot is, oh, you've changed, especially whenever you've had a kid, right? Or say your spouse, your partner, it's like, you've changed, you're not the same, things are different. And it's like, but things are supposed to be different. Like you have an entire human that you're looking out for. So you don't have time to maybe hang out with friends like you used to and do the extra things that you used to do because your priorities have shifted. So you've changed, but you've become better.
Yes.
And that's not for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's better because you highlight what are the best parts of this? What can I take from here? I only have X amount of time in a day, so I can only bring forth the things that I really love. I can't really stay over here in this mess or over there halfway. I want to bring forth my best self with the time that I have because it's so limited, especially as me as a single mom. Every day I'm like fully invested in someone else. So it's like those little short windows within a day, I have to maximize. Like, so what is it that I want to do with that little bit of time? Because I can go lay down, which I don't discourage, like there's times where you do need to go lay down. But if I wasn't laying down, what could I do to bring forth like my best self?
Right. So how do you take care of yourself as a single mother? How do you find the time to do that? Not saying it's any easier for those that are with their partner, but just examples of just how do you take care of yourself as a mother and take some time out for yourself?
I had to figure out where I could pull time from, and I couldn't pull time from her because she was still so small, but I could take a day off of work and still use my PTO and get paid. It's not like I'm going to go traveling at the moment. So I can use that time to actually sit down, have a day to myself, and do something that I really like to do. So for me, I like to create fashion videos. So when I have those 2 hours a day, randomly, I'm able to put together a script and pull production together. And then I take a day off of work and I'm able to do that whole big, the video that I really dream of. So it allowed me to kind of like schedule around her, but then also intentionally make time for myself where it's like, okay, I'm really going to have fun this day. I'm really going to feel fulfilled. And that's going to sustain me until the next time I get to take a day off work.
Right. And your fashion videos are amazing, by the way. What's your Instagram? Just in case people want to check that out.
Say
one more time. Okay, got it. Yes. And I'll put that in the show notes as well. You mentioned something earlier where you're like, will she really know like who I am and what I like and this, that, and the other? And, that's a thought that I had in 2022. This year has been a year of evolving for me. Like, well, I'm evolving every day, probably. My husband says I evolve like way too fast. I'm constantly changing. But 2022 was a year where I feel like I'm back. Like I'm all the way back. I'm here. Like I really do feel like I did confidence-wise and self-esteem-wise. I feel even better than I did prior to kids, But in 2022, I took that time to just think about like, well, what do they know about me? And that's how one of the things that motivated me to do this podcast even is because now they know how mommy thinks, like what her views were on certain things. So if mommy were not here tomorrow, they can still play this back and think like, oh, okay, that's how she thought about life, man. Like, and that was so important to me, because otherwise I'm like, what do you have? You have, things, you know what I mean? And that means nothing at all. But as far as like who you are as a person, like at a deep down level, I felt like this podcast was the way for me to express myself, and for them and my grandchildren and great grandchildren, this can live forever because it's all in the clouds. So at any point, they can go and pull, right? I think of it very similar to Bob Marley, like we will forever know his words, and if you don't know, you're able to look him up and you hear him and you're like, yeah. And if we didn't have his words in song, and some of the interviews that we've heard, like if we didn't have that, it would be a loss, and right now everything is saved, in the cloud, like pictures, right? I'm still old school. I still print pictures. Do you print pictures?
I used to, but I stopped recently.
Okay. I still print pictures. I try to tell myself like, a few times a year to like make a, check mark a few things and print them, because I think about those things like if something happens, they're going to be like, oh, I don't know her password. I can't unlock her phone to get these pictures out the cloud, and it's like, oh my God, like people don't even have pictures anymore. And I'm used to, whenever like your grandma and them pass, you're like, you go in that box and you start looking through all the old photos and you're like, oh, look at this baby. And who was that? I bet you don't know who that is. And look how they grew up and look at their hair. Like, all the things that come from that, and I think about that and I'm like, man, so I still print pictures, but, I definitely understand the point of like you wanting to let them know who you are as Syreeta, right? Like I want them to know who I am as Zen, not just mommy. Like I am your mother, but it's like, I'm a whole, spiritual being over here that has a lot of thoughts and a lot of views and, different perspectives on things. And I'm over here living a whole life. And I want them to know me as Zen as well. That's really, really important. Do you feel the same way? Like you want her to know, like, I don't want to say both sides, but I feel as if generations prior, you only knew the mother, like, you knew them as a mother. You don't really know like the ins and outs of what their lives were really like,
Mm-hmm. And I did not know my mother's ins and outs, but like she has so many friends that I was able to connect and I could see her through different eyes when I saw her with her friends. So that was very like important to me. I went ocean to see my friends. I want her to talk to my friends on the phone, because that was like looking back at my childhood, that's something I really loved about my mom and my aunts, which were just her friends, was just like, oh, okay, that's so-and-so. That's how she saw her. That was this relationship. It gave me clues to who she was as a woman. Yeah. And so I want to give clues to my daughter, especially because I have a daughter. Like, it's like, here's how you can be, how you can grow up. Here's what not to do that mommy did, and I want to be open so that she's not learning what I learned at 32, at 32. I need her to learn it a bit earlier so that we're not repeating situations.
Yeah, we're unlearning some things, we're breaking some cycles and being just very like upfront. So really you're not leaving clues. Like this is direct communication with her. You know what I mean? Where she won't have to look for it or ask any questions for it. You're opening up your heart to share with her from the beginning.
Exactly. But I'm still very much guarding her. Like I don't say everything, it's still on the child level, but I do try to just communicate, the values of the things. So I may not like a situation, but what can I communicate as the lesson of the situation and not it itself? Like, I don't want her not liking someone or I want her to come to her own conclusions, but I want to just like drop elements so that she has knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. So how are you learning your new self now?
I love my new self. Like, I love what you said earlier when you said becoming a mom gives you like this different type of power and this different type of, I don't know what it is, but I feel very confident as a mom, but more so as a woman now that I never felt before. Before I felt like I was just like, oh, like kind of silly. And now I'm just like, this doesn't work. I don't want this. This is my goals. This is how I want to do it. I feel very much empowered. And yeah, I just kind of move with that. Like I just move with that power, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I take the time out to kind of like ask myself, do I still like certain things? Like, what is it that I like now? Like there's certain music that I would listen to before that now it's like, and it maybe it's age, I don't know. But I can't listen to it anymore. And these artists' names, I'm like, who is the baby and who are these babies? I don't.
So many babies.
So many babies.
Girl, it's our age, unfortunately, but
it's our age, okay? It's our age. But you know what the other thing is? Like, and it's also like a part of like the spiritual awakening part as well. For me, like I cannot listen to certain lyrics. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of things that kind of come into play. But I do like ask myself, like, what do I like now as I'm getting to know my new self? So, for example, I don't like traveling as much as I used to. And I was a big time traveler. And now I'm kind of like, what'd you say?
Because it's more of a hassle. You have to get the kids. You got to do, it's so much more to it.
It's, you know what? But also I like home. I do, like, I really enjoy my space. I'm at this mode of like comfort in so many different ways that like, I like my bed. I like my bathroom. I like my space. I like the energy that I've created, and, hotels and moving around sometimes. I'm just kind of like, oh, like I guess for me now, like traveling, it has to mean something, or I'm not so fast to jump to it as I used to. I think my soul is more settled. I think that's the thing. Yeah, I think that's the thing. That's probably what it is. It's more settled. So I do still travel. I do still want to go and get like, a break from, the day to day, of course. But before I used to have the itch, like I just had to like move around. And I think it was because I was so like unsettled in where I was in my day to day, so I had to evaluate that in myself. And so that's something where I'm just like, I kind of change it up, or I do something different. I, more than ever before, whenever I talk about like getting to know my new self, I have a lot more woman friends than I've ever had before.
Same.
Yeah. Okay. Cause I was that person who was like, no, I don't really, I'm not with these girls. They too catty. I don't have time for that. Like, I'll hang with the guys. They're easy. You don't have all the attitudes and all of that kind of stuff going on. But now that my children really brought me out of my box for sure, and like forced me to have to meet a lot of people, because I was always keeping them active, because that was how I was getting through my days and making it easier. But then also like, I have this great circle of women now, and I'm finding so much joy in it, where I never had these different women of different shades and, different perspectives. And we are just like, we're like feeding each other. You know what I mean? We're like loving on each other and feeding each other and supporting each other. And I never would have thought I would have so many women and like enjoying it,
Same. And having a baby showed me the beauty and value of a woman that I didn't see before. I just see women as just superior, like just amazing beings. And I feel like that has helped me with that side of it as well. And where I have the biggest change isn't so much with travel, but what I've seen myself change the most since having a child is with relationships. as it was important to watch my mom have these various relationships with her friends and her girlfriends. And I got notes about her from, watching her interact. I wanted my daughter to see that as well. So in terms of a mate, for me, since having a child, that has changed. And directly because of what I didn't want her to view me sad. I didn't want her to view me less than who I know I am,
Yeah.
And that's also changed with my girlfriends. I went back to people who I was friends with when I was a child, and I've rekindled relationships with those women now, and they have children, and our children are friends. And I just see like so much value in relationships, and I've changed so much in that area since becoming a mom. So that's my way of changing, like you change with travel.
Yeah. You're constantly just evolving and making yourself better, and it's beautiful. It's fun, and I think our kids are, I say it over and over again, they're great teachers in every way. And they force you to kind of like stand up and be better and to look at yourself, because you do things for them, and but you're also doing it for yourself, and it benefits you a lot. They were doing for them. It does benefit us, and like our growth and everything. And I just want to bring up another point that you had brought up in another conversation. You said that you live in a fantasy world sometimes. Like, explain that.
So I love fashion. So to me, fashion is fantasy. It's not a necessity. It allows people to go off into different worlds. When I was little, I would go through magazines and go to the editorial pages and just escape. And that's how I learned culture. And that's how I learned foods. And that's how I learned different things, was through magazines and articles in the fantasy, or just the unattainable life, or sometimes it's not even attainable, just things I didn't know, through those magazines. And for me, when my reality got too hard, I realized that I was missing that dose of fantasy. Like I was missing the exploration of creativity and learning through other people's creativity, like how you were saying with music, like, oh, I stopped doing this and stopped doing that. And so I had to reopen that vault and start to say, okay, how can I themselves that I find interesting? Let me pick up a magazine, my favorite thing, even though it's outdated.
Hold on. We went on a huge pause. Just go back to where you just said, you said, just like you said that you were music or something like that.
Okay.
Go back to that.
Yeah, I just had to open up a new vault, like just like what you said with music, in terms of you stop listening to certain things when you were focused on your child. I had to also like reopen that vault and say, okay, how can I express myself creatively? How can I look at other people's creativity? How can that inspire me? And that fantasy of creativity, of self-expression, is what builds me in my actual reality in my day-to-day. And I didn't have that for some time. And since having her, moving back home, being closer to family, that fantasy and that creativity like helps my reality. I mean, it's very much like I'm centered in reality, but it's just the beauty of watching other people's self-expression and then expressing myself that, I mean, it just builds another layer to life for me.
Yeah. See, this really spoke to me because I am a Pisces. I live in the dream world. I really don't want to deal with reality a lot. Like, I like to just like, let me be in the clouds. Everything is good up there. Because what's happening on Earth is just a little too much for me sometimes. But I like how you basically what you're saying is that it's okay to deal with like your reality, but mix in the fantasy world too. Like, think about or be in like that fantasy area and that creative space. And it's not necessarily doing something creative. Mm-hmm. It's more so just like allowing yourself to dream and be and have fun and go. And you still have your day to day. You have that basics. We have our main responsibilities that we have to do. We all know that's there. But giving ourselves that outlet of experiencing something new, right? And just living in that fantasy world so that whenever you blend it together, you're in a much more balanced and happier space, because the day-to-day can get so boring.
Yes.
Right. And it just makes you just like, your confidence, yourself, everything just kind of like, oh my goodness, what am I doing? Because it can just drain you.
Very much so. And some people, like, I call it fantasy because I like the creativity and that side of it. But other people like you may call it meditation, It's just a detachment from right here and centering and going inside. For me, I'm a little more external, where I'm looking around and digging through other people. And that's what gives me my peace, like seeing other people's creativity and performing on my own as well. So, I definitely encourage new moms to find what that process is for them and to make sure that they layer that onto their day-to-day reality, because there's always bills, there's always caring for a child, there's always caring for yourself. But I think that you truly care for yourself when you indulge in that second layer of life, which to me is just like, for some people, it's like a spiritual world. For me, it is as well. It's also a creative world, like just indulge a little bit more in there and bring that into your life.
Yeah, I love this. Man, such great information. Is there anything else that you want to share?
No, I just hope that, the main thing that comes from being a mom for any woman is that they learn to be themselves. Like, because you have these little eyes watching you, and it's so hard. And sometimes you have to really take hard leaps and steps to actually make sure that you're putting your best self forward. And it may be periods of time where things seem a little less fun. You're not doing all the things. You're not being creative yet. You're not doing those things, but you're healing. And that's important too. Like, just to take time to actually become a better version of yourself, so that they have a blueprint that's better than what they have, is better than what you are now.
Yeah, no, great points right there. And it's never too late.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, we're talking about our kids, and we have very young kids, but we're on the journey. Like, this is where we are now, but who knows? I'm excited to see what the next 10 years is going to be, because we're taking those steps. And that's the main thing, is that it's never too late. And it doesn't matter if your child is 18, 22, or 10 years old. It's like, you're still just going through the steps, you're going through the journey, and just continue to just tap in with yourself. Like, don't let yourself go, and if you feel like you've gone, then just catch yourself and don't keep going too far. Right. And it's never too late to do that. And it may be peaks and valleys to all of that as well. But it's just having the awareness to just bring ourselves back together. And if you don't have a community, find a community. Right. And it can be as simple as, I have the Facebook group of Unlearning Life as We Know It Facebook group. And the point of that is it's a healing community. But also check the circle that you have around you, right? Those kinds of things make a huge difference in the outcome of who you are as a being. So, get yourself a good community too, that's like healing and learning and growing and, motivating you to be a better person as well. And continue to knock it out as a mother. And I'm so proud of you. Like,
proud of you.
We've gone far, and you have gone far, and I'm so proud of you. And here you are now with another business. You're always doing something with the business. So yes. So I'm so proud of you. And thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I love you much.
No, thank you. And thank you for the listeners. And we'll touch base again next week. Peace.
I am Dr. Zen Johnson, and you've been listening to Unlearning Life as We Know It podcast. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Dr. Zen Johnson. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another awakening conversation. Thank you for listening.